Hi, this is Michelle Sorro, and you are listening to Awakened Nation with Brad Solis.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Solis, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people, just like you and me, from all over, who are doing amazing things. Welcome to Awakened Nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have Michelle Sorro on the show today. Michelle, how you doing?
I'm so good. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to read a little bit of your bio, but this is just, I am super honored to have you on the show because we can now talk spiritual stuff, soul awakening stuff, all the cool stuff that you embody in this lifetime. And I love having you on the show. Thank you.
I'm so honored to be here, really.
Good, good. I like what you say in your biography. As a heart-centered transformational guide, Michelle Sorro has developed groundbreaking content that has been uplifting, transforming, and cultivating a global community since 2018. She's the host of the Fire and Soul podcast, a top podcast in self-development with esteemed guests such as Jack Canfield, Danielle Laporte, Panache Desai, Dave Asprey, and many other luminaries devoted to conscious evolution. And that's what we're going to talk about today, conscious evolution. Yeah. Thank you. You got started. I hate to do this, but let's go back in time to how you got started. You were you a host on the Home Shopping Network? Is that correct?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Back in the day, they did call it the Home Shopping Network. And then I don't know when they changed it to the acronym of just HSN. It got cool. Yeah. I was there for 3 years, basically 2011, 12, and 13. Long time ago now.
Yeah, it feels like yesterday, and yet at the same time, it feels like another lifetime ago.
For sure.
And so let's talk about, you had an awakening. Yeah, and I teased you about this when we were talking before I even asked you to be on the show. It's like, okay, when did you wake up? And so let's talk about that a little bit. It wasn't overnight, I'm guessing, but you did step into this awakening of soul.
Yeah. It's been an ongoing journey. I'm sure I've always been around self-development, personal growth, spiritual growth. My parents, specifically my mom, raised us on a pretty steady diet of it. So I was always familiar with like the new thought leaders, the people in the space that we're familiar with. I wouldn't say, though, that I learned how to fully integrate, much less embody any of that until, quite frankly, even just the past couple of years, where I became awakened to the matrix, so to speak, for a lack of better term. And then that provided a portal to have a profound spiritual awakening that actually connected me back to what I had always been interested in, drawn to, presented with, but never really fully integrated in the past 2 years has just been a demand to integrate that awareness with my embodiment.
It's very funny, because I always look at all the guests that have been on my show, and myself included. A lot of the work we're doing today really started in childhood. And I noticed this with myself. I grew up and went to Catholic school. My mom was more spiritual. And I'll never forget, we were having our Catholic church torn down and replaced with this modern thing. And so we were meeting over in the auditorium of my, elementary school, Catholic school. And we were doing mass one Sunday, and my mom comes back, from taking Holy Communion. She comes back and she leans in and looks at me and she goes, "Bradley, there's more than this, and I want you to search for it."
Oh, what a good mom.
And I was 10. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I don't know about you, but I've always talked to God by standing in nature, like in the backyard, looking up at the stars and going, "Hey, can you help me here?" Or just having a conversation. So I find it funny. Yeah, very similar. I was deathly shy as a kid too. So now the work that we do, I'm just blown away by this. So what was, you've attended a lot of seminars. Were there some that just like, it was like, wow, okay, I found it. You want to talk about that?
I can for sure. It's hard to pinpoint one particular seminar over another until actually later in life, mid 40s, in fact, where many of us suddenly remember there is much more to this life experience than the external validation or status, right? All of that, those programmed markers for success or meaning in life. But I was at Date with Destiny, Tony Robbins event in December of 2017. And even though I had listened to his stuff, like basically my whole life, it seems, on tape and then CD and the DVDs and then to YouTube. And so I never had a desire to go to an in-person seminar. And I remember thinking, why would anyone pay? There's so much free content. I mean, that's how disconnected I was from the immersive experience. And, but anyway, lo and behold, I went, and that was in West Palm Beach in the last month of 2017. And that was where I can say that as I look back now at the beginning of, you know, what some people call a dark night of the soul or a true awakening, the veil lifted in a profound way. Day 4 of that 6-day event where I dropped to my knees, Sia's Chandelier, best hit, you know, was blasting through the arena of 5,000 unleashed souls. The lights were flashing red, blue, yellow, and green. And it felt surreal. I was not who I came in as, yet I wasn't who I was going to be leaving as. So I was somewhere in the midst of this metamorphosis. And I remember dropping to my knees and sobbing because I had thought at that time, all that mattered in life was that I get a full-time job on Extra, an entertainment news show that I had been on for about a year at that point, but I was only in a short, you know, 1 segment a week position. But there was talk of expanding my role, and that's all I wanted and cared about and was obsessed about since I was a little girl, is to be on national TV, and that's how I would matter. That's how I would be worthy. All those things, right?
Yeah.
And at that event, I got clarity and divine guidance that I no longer needed that validation, and that in fact I was here to help others awaken to their inner power, their source of embodied truth, sovereignty, really. And I didn't know where to begin, but that was the beginning of the journey that I have now been on. And a friend there recommended I start a podcast and just start sharing. And I was like, a podcast? I thought those were reserved for celebrities or mega brands. And that was the beginning of my journey. And so, yeah, it's just been in an evolution ever since.
All I can say is, wow. Something that made you drop to your knees. And by the way, your Fire and Soul podcast is tremendous. Ladies and gentlemen, please subscribe, listen. There's so many guests on there that you're going to love and enjoy. This awakening, I find it an amazing. I mean, what you just said is making me chuckle. I'm sorry, but you dropped to your knees, and all of a sudden you went from, hey, I'm going to be on TV to, okay, you have a much bigger mission. Hello, you know, and I always feel like spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, the universe. I usually wake up by the 3rd tap on the back of the head and then realize it's been 9 taps on the back of the head.
For sure.
You want to talk about that? Because I know that happens, but we suddenly become aware by like the 9th time. And then we turn around and go, oh, I'm making this bigger than it, you know, harder than it has to be.
Oh, well, there's a theme for so many of us in moments when we remain unconscious to our deep inner knowing. So actually, if we go back to even what we were talking about a few moments ago, and a lifelong interest, fascination, draw to self-development, I remember being in my teens and early 20s and thinking that one day when I actually lived out all the other things that I wanted to live out on my bucket list, you know, in my dreams, you know, career, that I would circle back to being either like a minister, like a New Thought minister, a reverend of Science of Mind, which was the lineage that I came from, and that I was supposed to do that line of work, but ego had a hard time with that, knowing because everything was supposed to be on TV.
Right.
And so I followed a lot of that for a long time. It's what I cared about: entertainment, Hollywood, and until I didn't, and so until I actually saw what it actually really is, which is a whole nother veil lifting, right? And so as I can look back and connect the dots, I don't know if it was necessarily like 8 or 9 times. I just know there was a very, very clear through line that I wasn't willing to surrender to until I was basically called to the point where there was no way to deny that truth.
Another wow.
Yeah.
I look at myself and I have to kick. I'm not going to be hard on myself anymore. I stopped doing that.
Good.
I hit 60 and I said, okay, we're going to be nicer to Brad.
Yeah, good.
But there seems to be how awakening works. There's soul. We don't become soul. Soul is in us. We are soul. That's that energy. When we wake up in the morning and we don't know our name yet, we're in that twilight. That's the energy body, that I call soul. And some of you may not believe this. I don't want to force my beliefs on other people, but there seems to be a slow and desperate marriage that takes place between the living personality that we have in the forefront and us connecting to our higher self, we can call it, and then coming into the, the lotus petals, get revealed. And now we are, I know we talked about this a little bit, but everything I was as a child, they tried to get rid of using a lot of left brain, memorization and learn this. And now I'm getting back to that child that I was back in and all those little tiny nuances, all those little gifts that I came to earth with, I'm able to use now. And I know, let's talk about that a little bit. You use all your gifts today. I can see that. You use them all.
I love what you just shared there. That was so beautifully put. And I fully get where you're coming from. And also I noticed a distinction in your vibration, in your auric field, when you started talking about finally tapping into the gifts that you've been bestowed. So the way that I look at where I am now, and it's really in these past 2 years where I had the profound spiritual awakening that was spawned by the external awakening, the matrix awakening, opening. Well, I didn't open the red pill rabbit hole door. It was open for me at a mastermind, at a super fancy business mastermind event that I was at in February of 21 in Sedona, Arizona, at the swanky 5-star hotel. And it was our first gathering in person, and everyone there was, quote, awake. But I didn't know that or even really what that meant yet. But the sidebar dialogues at dinner tables and things like that was clearly different. And it was all reminiscent of things I had heard or had dismissed, right? Classically called conspiracy theories or whatever. Like, yeah. I kind of thought some of that was probably true, but I wasn't willing to examine, willing to be with. But anyway, so someone opened up the red pill rabbit hole door, and I'm the one who chose to walk through it. That takes phenomenal courage and bravery. And here's what I want to say about my response, at least in this given moment, to your question. My gifts came online when I opened that door. My gifts became an integrative process when I was willing to face the darkness that humanity is enslaved by. And by design, and there's a beautiful great awakening that's happening on the planet, and it's beautiful. And I do believe that people like you and I are designed and destined to be the wayshowers of part of whatever we are here to contribute toward those who are beginning to awaken now. But it wasn't until I was willing to first face off with that, which was harrowing for me. It wasn't fun. It wasn't easy. It was fairly rapid. February to basically August, it felt like I was in a nonstop nervous breakdown. I didn't know how to be. I didn't know how to be in the world, and I was scared and terrified, and also it was at the same time when the shots were being demanded, and I lived in LA and still do, and we had the longest lockdown of any city in America, And so people were going stir crazy. And I knew really early on that was not going to be what I was going to believe or buy into. But I was living in an environment that I loved. Santa Monica was my soulmate. That's how I always referred to her. 21 years, just remodeled my place, never planned on leaving the year before. And in August of 21, I could not go one more moment in that environment. Yeah. I was the Karen, according to that community, right?
Wow.
So my point is that when I was willing to face off with all of that and being the outlier, being the Karen and standing for truth, and as scared as I was and as courageous as it required me to be then speak truth on my podcast and to leave Santa Monica, not knowing where I would go, to start to look at all of my areas of business, what's in soul alignment, what's not, because I knew I was here to carry whatever my participation was toward this beautiful awakening, this exquisite gift that we have the honor to be alive on this planet for. And so inside of that is where my gifts really came on. And I really look at that now, because first it was the external, ooh, that's the fear, that's the anxiety of what's going on in the matrix. But then for those of us who are willing, we are being given a mirror to take a look deep within and to see where we have separated and or denied the divine within ourselves, our own innate, authentic power, not ego. And that is when my true awakening began. And like you with nature, for me, it's the moon and it's trees. And I spent the next 6 months, I couldn't even drive, Brad. Like I had to reconfigure how to be in the world. But to answer the question in a very long spiral, circuitous sort of way, which is my style, it was integrating the shadow so that I could finally, I feel like, restore to my wholeness. And I don't get it perfect and right every single day, but for the most part, I love where I am and I love where I'm being drawn.
Beautiful. I mean, that's beautifully said. I completely understand where you're coming from. I spent probably 25 years being a conspiracy theorist, but looking into facts, and it started with my ex-wife. She introduced me to an economist who didn't do any conspiracy theories. And he started to explain how money is used geopolitically and around the world. And it woke me up. Second, yes, I did read David Icke, and I got so depressed from one of his books about 4 chapters in, I had to stop reading. I said, if this truly is true, and a lot of it you can back up by just doing your own research and seeing it plain as day right in front of you, I said to myself, I can't read this anymore. I had to put one of his books away and just say, I can't read this. I was really like, the Matrix just shattered everything I believed. My third eye awakened. I was also in a spiritual group called Ekankar.
My grandmother, I'm a devoted student of that work.
Yeah, I was in that for 30 some odd years, 35, I believe. And what it did is it raised my consciousness by doing the spiritual exercises. And I was able to step out of the body, go to classes, do whatever. And I could operate in multiple consciousness arenas, at the same time. I still have, this thing, I have to shut it off. I can go into a restaurant and not only can I hear every conversation in the room, I know which cars are going by outside. It opened me way up. So I'm going through all this at that time. I'm reading, and all of a sudden, I don't know about you, but I said to myself, you know what? I might be depressed, but I have to read this book. And it was a David Icke book, The Biggest Secret. And I said, I must read this book, and I can only get through it at the pace I can, get through it. So I devoted myself to reading 1 chapter a month and then putting aside and bringing my energy back up, because it's pulling you down into the reality and shattering every illusion that I ever had. And so I completely understand that. And integrating our gifts, let's talk more about that, because I lived in 2 worlds for the longest time. There was the businessman, Brad Zollis, who was the art director, creative director, executive at a publicly traded company. And then I'd have this secret retreat where I'd go do spiritual exercises and go to an Eckankar event for, a week and then come back, and I couldn't talk about it. Like I had divided those two worlds. Did you find in that attempt to integrate that now you've had enough with that separation, playing the game of two people?
Well, first of all, I just want to piggyback on something that you shared, and it was David Icke. Did you read his last book, the most recent, The Trap?
No, I haven't gotten that one yet. I got to get that.
So it's the only book that I have actually listened to, and he narrates 18 hours of audio. And that was earlier this year, maybe February. And I too, even though I was already so awake to so much and had seen him on a lot of channels, including his own network, that book scared me and put me into a very low vibration state. And I had to pause about 2/3 of the way through. And I was like, this is not good for my mental health. And I was like, shit, this stuff is terrifying. I thought I was scared a year ago. And then I also got the message, nope, you need to go back and you need to finish it. And the main reason why was because I knew that it was important for me, this is just my own journey, to be able to face the hardest truths so that no matter what comes on my path, internally or externally, I can be with it. Because if I truly believe that I have everything within me to meet and face anything, then I can read what David Icke has to say. And plus he's now got 32, 33 years of a legacy of virtually everything he has said has come to pass. So there is that.
Yes.
And I would rather, and I've discovered this about myself, which is I've always known, but I really, really discovered this, and I honor this about my little soul. It wants truth over everything.
Yeah.
Over everything. I would just give me the truth. And these days I'm like, I'll take it with a little bit of cream, organic cream, please. It doesn't have to be a shot of espresso. Anyway, So I think your question was, can you refresh my memory on the question?
Living in the two worlds,
yes.
kind of saying no to it at some point and saying, you know what, this is what I am. This is who I am.
I've come to know, trust, have faith in that when we do the work that we are doing, we are blessed beyond measure. And I just trust in that. I don't have a husband taking care of me. I am a sole provider for me and my household. I don't have a parent I can go to make ends meet. So I say that not to pump myself up, but because the buck stops with me. So making that decision is incredibly brave. And I honor that part about my soul too. But to answer your question in another way, I didn't really live between the two worlds, or I wasn't really present to it, because when I opened that, when I chose to walk through the red pill door and slide down, it was fairly quick. It was like the Band-Aid was taken off. The fire hose was upon my face. I couldn't breathe. I really didn't even know if I would live. It was pretty intense and dark. And then got through that. But that's when I had to come out with my quote truth on my podcast. And I got canceled right away. I went through that. And and then I found another person to produce my show. And as soon as it shifted energetic hands, my podcast exploded in growth. So I just keep watching and witnessing, and I'm like, God is so good.
Yeah.
Right?
He is. It is powerful when you step into the courage. I had a divorce in 2018, and that devastated me because I didn't think that was ever going to happen. But when I came out of that, I didn't approach my spiritual studies from the mental point of view, like, okay, I'm going to learn this, or I'm going to train in this, or I'm going to do shadow work. Actually saying it sets up, oh, there's your curriculum. I didn't do that. Right. I stopped doing that. I stopped with the goal setting and just integrated. Yeah. As soon as I thought of it, I integrated it. As soon as I was able to shift and change, or I wanted that, I integrated it, and I would stop leaning forward, seeking validation. This is a big clue that I learned a long time ago, but forgot to integrate it. And that is, as adults, especially if you grew up a little dysfunctional, you might still be seeking validation from outside sources. And a good example is someone at work every day at 5:00 goes and shows their boss their work. The boss never asked you to do that, but you went and go, look what I did. I'm going to leave now. It's sort of like, here, look what I did. Give me some validation. What if you lived life where you stopped doing that? What if you just showed up, became present, and just your presence? Mos Def, the rapper, says this: my presence speaks volumes before I say a word.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because there's beingness and then there's trying to prove. And I prefer sitting in beingness.
Yeah. That's so beautifully put. And you bring up a very stark memory for me in the midst of my awakening when the first season of the awakening, 2 seasons, it was fall and winter, 21 into 22, which isn't that long ago, the steepest parts, right? The spiritual awakening, where there was the integration. And I remember realizing I had no drive. The relentless hustle, the do, make X amount of dollars, then double, triple, quadruple every year and be around those people because proximity is power, all that exhausting, masculine drive, push, prove, mask on energy. Yeah. And, but I didn't know that there was anything wrong with it. And in fact, there isn't. Like each soul is on their own unique journey. We are all here to evolve into however we are called. It's up to us or not to listen, to honor. But I do remember having a thought of, I haven't had a drive energy for 6 months. Oh shit. Will it ever come back? How am I going to pay the bills? Well, what about my programs? What about my business? Like, oh my gosh. And I do remember feeling a little bit worried, but then I would hear the still small voice that would assure me to just, and I literally have it on my desk, so I'm going to show it to you. This came in a plant medicine ceremony, a tortoise, and the message from grandmother Ayahuasca in that weekend, right around spring, early spring of 22, was take all the time you need and trust. And it became like this active state of surrender. And then before long, it was like June when I finally launched something new that's now grown, and it's become a bit of my signature. And it's a women's only mastermind space that's now evolved into in-person retreats. And I really still don't know what exactly it is that I'll be doing. I'm just in the present, being, saying no to most, saying yes to what's a full body resonance, but more importantly, what feels like it's in integrity with the divine. And that's the only way I know how to describe it.
The hardest thing is coming to terms with the old saying, you leap off the cliff and you build the airplane as you're going down.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And I'm sitting here admiring what you've gone through. And it literally is trusting in that, what do we want to call it? That soul intuition, that communication that's coming from spirit, which not always is in words, it's in perception sometimes, or golden tongue wisdom, or we see something on a billboard and we're like, wait a minute, is that speaking to me?
And of course it is.
Yes, of course it is. But I love what you said, where, we get away from the hustle and the grind, and we just don't know what we don't know a lot of times. And I remember how much I hustled when I was in my 20s and 30s. Just, we're going to crush this. We're going to get it done. Yeah, I'm hustling. And then,
even with that tonality.
Yeah, it's like, let's do this. Yeah. We're rock stars.
Let's go.
Let's do
totally.
It. Yeah, totally. I had a mullet back then.
Oh, of course you did.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting.
Rock and roll, baby.
Yeah. So what I found fascinating from what you just said is, and this happens to all of us when you get out of that energy, when you are forced out of that energy. you can feel like a loser, because your mind is just, well, I'm not hustling. I must be, what am I if I'm not hustling, or I'm not trying to get the best grades, or I'm trying to get the top of the mountain, or I'm trying to make $1 million. And you're sitting on the couch going, what? I've been taking naps. I've been getting up and writing, but I haven't been building anything. And I find those moments are more and more necessary in this day and age, this moment of rest, where I consciously think, and it's not really using the mind think, it's more contemplation. What's coming in? What can I do with this? And here's a good example. This morning, I told my girlfriend, we're having coffee, and I said, I came up with this great idea. She goes, what? We're about to build the new website for my podcast. I had a series on with Dr. Randy Shannon and Dr. Joel Wallach, and we talked about you don't have to age. So Dr. Randy, she has long blonde hair like you, but she never dyes her hair. I said, well, what's your secret? And she's a naturopathic doctor, and she's telling me all about copper and selenium and all these. So I did a 2-part series. Well, I decided I'm going to make it a 5-part series under the title, You Don't Have to Age. We're going to talk about parasites. We're going to talk about chlorine dioxide, also known as MMS. I'm going to get my friend, Dr. Robert Scott Bell. He has his own show. I'm going to get him on, and I'm going to have, who is it? Well, I'm thinking of Dave Asprey now, inviting him. But David Avocado Wolf as well. I want to talk about parasites. Carrie Rivera, who helped cure her son of autism. We'll probably get banned on YouTube for me just saying this. But Carrie Rivera had a son who was this super brain, and he was 18 or 20 when she had her second child. And this child wound up with severe autism. She tried everything. And then she has protocols now that help cured her son. She's been banned everywhere. So I want to put this in a series. So sorry to be long-winded, but that was a discovery. It wasn't me sitting there planning it in a PowerPoint presentation and an outline in Microsoft Word. It was the universe kind of going, hey, this could be a really great product, but a service for people who really don't want to age. And do you find that your discoveries now are coming in from a very different way or methodology?
I find that I'm far more open and devoted to not only being curious about all these things that I had kind of heard about. I'm literally drinking chlorine dioxide, the CDS version. It helps me tremendously.
Me too.
Really,
I just had it. I had it this morning. I also spray it up into my nose because I had a little nasal infection.
Yeah.
And wow.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So
Sorry.
my COVID initiation, which I got COVID for the first and hopefully only time a few weeks back. And it was very initiatory. I don't know if we talked about that before we hit record or since we've been on, but it drew out what looks like a skin rash. I don't know if it's eczema or what, all around my nasal area and my chin. And then we made a spritzer with the CDS, and it is just fixing it. I mean, and then I'm doing some stuff internally, if you know what I mean, also with CDS, enemas and things like that. I mean, I not only am I curious about this stuff now, I am devoted to it. We have to be, at least in my world, and not to be scared of chemtrails and everything they're putting in the food or clothes, but just to be mindful of what can I do to just take as good a care of myself as possible without being so fanatical that I don't enjoy my life. Right. So it's like about an 80-20 rule, but 2 years ago, I was ordering in, ordering out, still smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol. I just was not willing to be conscious and or devoted to my health in the same way. But now it feels like it's a soul alignment. And the more that I am willing to be awake in that area, the more that I no longer feel diluted, dimmed, or diminished in my light. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
It's very funny that you said this because I started taking the MMS, the chlorine dioxide drops, and I've also been taking diatomaceous earth. My girlfriend's into this. I was blown away. This is why we got together, and we rent a house and everything now. It's because
So cool.
we're on the same plane when it comes to this stuff. And I'm sitting here, but I'm going to let you know a little secret. I don't think you know this about me, but my father was a chiropractor. So I grew up with this.
Oh, wow.
I learned reflexology in 1973 at the age of 10. My dad made me work on him and my mom because he wanted to see if this was worked, because this was a new thing coming into the world. And so I have all the meridians memorized and everything. And I used it in my martial arts training. Like all the black belts couldn't figure out how I could beat people. And I was just putting my thumb on a pressure point. And they're like, where'd you learn that? I go, as a child, so my girlfriend, Tao, is from Vietnam, and she grew up with Chinese medicine. So we instantly were talking the same language when we started sitting down. She does Qigong, which is, the coining, scraping. She has her own cupping kit. I was like, are you kidding me? The spirit aligned everything in this world.
So good. So, you look at that, because I think back to the devastation that you shared, you experienced in your divorce in 18. And, the only thing I have come to know that I know for certain is that life is death, rebirth, death, rebirth, death, rebirth. And so I look at that death of an identity, of a season, of a chapter, and then look at the beautiful birth, that you called in. Because it was time, it was the evolution of your soul. And now look at you here with Awakened Nation and the beautiful, important work that you are doing and giving people like us a platform. I know my show it's a top awakening show as well, but you really own this. And I love that, because it's creating a community where we all get to know, wow, there's so many of us out here, and we're all teaching each other. We are all each other's bridges in one way or another, right? There's no hierarchy. We're all learning from one another, and the lights are finding each other. And so when we do what we need to do to keep our light bright, the truth, our cosmic birthright, there's no mistake then that you and Tao found one another, and that you and I found one another, and that we're here. I can't even remember how we connected. Was it through Tony Watley's?
No, maybe? Actually, you and I met at a Leah Woodford event. And I have to thank Leah for that. Yeah. And we're talking probably 2018. I was the MC at a lot of her events.
That's right.
And I just stayed in touch. I've become friends with Linda Johansson James and a couple of other people from those things. And that's how I met Panache Desai. And so you and I have met in person, actually, and hung out. But it was so long ago. It was like, and I came in and I'm really super busy. So like Shay Hillenbrand has been on the show as well. So a couple of other people, but I always find it funny how soul meets soul. And you're right. I feel like we're in a very aggressive time where the awakening is taking place, this ascension that we're talking about. And everybody's like, it's almost like popcorn popping. It's like, pop, 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 pop. Everybody's starting to wake up. And maybe 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, I was made fun of when I would open my mouth about certain things. My friends would roll their eyes, and they're like, now they call me up because, like David Icke, he was on point. Wait, you're right. This is happening. What is going on? And the powers that be, let's ignore them, folks. I mean, I don't mean ignore them. They are going to do what they're going to do because we're waking up.
Yeah, there's a desperation and an acceleration on their agenda is what I intuitively get. I do think, not to sound doomy and gloomy, but I do think it's going to get significantly scarier for those who aren't aware of it. And I think imminently, actually, I think this summer, based on some really great resources and stuff. But if we are awake and aware, which is the conscious evolution that you referenced in my bio, if we are awake and aware to that, and we have trained our nervous system to be prepared for the darkness within and the darkness without, right? As below, so above, we can be with anything, and we know that, like, there's a great metaphor that Paul Selig, who's a beautiful channel, one of the most sought after, he and the guides, is on my show recently. And he said, it's kind of like a shaking out of a rug, and you're like, whoa, I didn't realize it had all that crap in it. Right. And so that's what is needing to happen. But humanity, I mean, listen, who's to really say? I don't have a crystal ball, but it does feel like there's a potency in the percentage of those who are awake and aware that we have chosen to prevail. We have chosen to know our truth and to know our power. How that gets revealed in the next part of the agenda, we shall see. Because all we have to do is what David Icke says: say no. That's it.
Wow.
He said it's the most powerful word that so many are afraid. And so that's been a theme in this conversation, actually, that I'm getting really present to right now, which is the courage that's required for us to speak up and say no. We don't have to have any aggression. No. There's just fear or love and power. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
And when I say power, I mean like authentic power, no ego.
Right.
Yeah.
I always say the difference between arrogance and confidence is a made up matrix from the person's ego based on lack. They haven't actually done this or done that. Whereas confidence is, I know I can crush this, even though I've never done it before. It's like, I'm going to try this for the first time. Speaking of which, you were talking about death and rebirth.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your journey of ayahuasca, because I have done ayahuasca as well. Back in 2022.
Oh, okay.
I went out to the California desert, and we were laying under the stars, no tents, nothing, around a circle of fire. And I remember having a choice between leaving and staying.
Like on the planet?
Yeah. And I wasn't breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, if you want to come back, you can breathe now. And I just went, and I sat up, bolt upright, and I was reborn on September 25th. That's my second birthday. Let's talk about your ayahuasca journey. And if you don't feel comfortable going into the details, a lot of people may not know what ayahuasca is, but it is a combination of a bush and a vine that is boiled into a tea that awakens us in certain areas of our brain. DMT, I believe, is the active ingredient. And some people say they see God, you hallucinate. But what most people get out of it is healing of traumas, awakening, other things. But let's talk about your journey a little bit, because, Soul and Fire is about awakening that fire energy in us, which is soul coming and awakening in life to jumpstart it, actually.
Well, first of all, your story sounds profound. I totally understand that distinction of having that date as your true rebirth, that deconstruction of what you knew and then what you were born into. I would say for me, I've done it now 6 times. I have such respect for the plant medicine and for the set and setting. It's really important to understand your guides, your shamans, your facilitators, and the space that they cultivate. And I was very fortunate in all my experiences to have such a sacred container.
That's important. I felt that was why my journey was with a gentleman named Bearheart. He's been on my show.
I know who Bearheart is. Wow.
Yeah.
Follow him on Facebook. I haven't heard anyone else bring him up.
Bearheart I was introduced to Bearheart through a good friend of mine, Mike Purvis, who was studying to be a shaman at one point. Mike, when I was getting my divorce, he offered me a room out here in Vegas. So I just packed everything up and moved out, and we became good friends. I'd known him for years, online mostly. And he introduced me to Bearheart, and, I kept putting it off, because I'm a very big fan of, I check inwardly. Is it time? Am I ready? Is this what I really want to do? And when I said yes, we did the 6-hour drive from Vegas to California, and, I watched my diet for a month, everything that, goes into that, and what I really wanted to work on. And when we went out into the desert, and we the way Bearheart does is he has a structure where you begin to, what are you going to call out, when you're out in the wilderness? Then you're blindfolded and driven to where we need to go. And we get to yell and scream at our antagonists when we were growing up. And then we did a little jujitsu on the bag, we're fighting until we're exhausted. And then the sun goes down and we get introduced to grandmother medicine, ayahuasca, and you get to smell it and introduce yourself. And then I just did a small portion and it helped me. I think it took 15 minutes. My brain was freaking out. And I basically stood up. I was trying to get away from where I was at. Finally, I stopped. I'm looking up at the sky. I'm grabbing my head and everything's going wobbly. And all I said to myself was, I accept what I'm about to go through and what I'm about to learn. 100. I accept it 100%. And my whole nervous system calmed down. And I think another 5 or 10 minutes later, I thought I was throwing up, but I wasn't. My lungs were purging. And it turns out my father, he had played psychological games with me, and he has stepkids as well. And I was purging that all out of my lungs because he smoked a pipe my whole life. And tobacco carries intention in it.
It's a sacred plant. It's just abused.
And so I just for 4 hours was hacking and coughing to the point that the next day my throat and my lungs were sore. I couldn't even do a second round of ayahuasca. But I found myself on the desert floor, choking. And I go, Dad, what the hell did you do to me? And this is like 4 hours in. I'm like laying there. And my dad appeared in my third eye with grandmother ayahuasca. And he says, what I did to you was wrong. And I apologize. And then we hugged and we parted. And he said, I wish I could help your sister because I didn't mean to do what I did to her. And then gone like the wind. And when I got up from that, I laughed the rest of the night until I fell asleep. But that was what ayahuasca did for me. It helped me release that dad stuff, How about for you? I mean, if you want to share it, that's okay.
Sure.
This is a sacred place if you want to.
Sure. I actually feel really comfortable with you. And I have highlighted every nuanced detail on the Fire and Soul podcast. So for better or for worse, I think I have put out 6 or 7 episodes with detail. But I am curious about one thing before I move into a little bit of my story. When you said that your dad appeared with grandmother medicine, how did grandmother medicine appear for you? Because she occurs differently for everybody.
She was an older woman way in the background, almost like a shadow. Like I just knew that her, and Native American for me. And she, had, the lines on her face from age and wisdom and life. And she was just there as creating sacred space for us to heal, letting my dad come through. Because here's the weird part. I dismissed my parents from having to watch over me. They were both dead. But I could feel their presence all the time. My mother was waking me up constantly in the middle of the night. Her ghost, whatever you want to call it. And some people might think this is like eye roll moment, but it literally was happening. I was like, Mom, could you please stop? It was. And so I said, you don't have to watch over me anymore. You can you can move forward in your journey. And I had said goodbye to my father. So for him to reappear again, it was his last way of saying, hey, I'm sorry. And I'm moving on to the higher planes to learn. And so for me, that was, So when he disappeared, so did grandmother ayahuasca. It was just, but it was.
So she was
powerful.
Almost the facilitator, the wayshower. Yeah, that's beautiful. For me, she has only shown, not as a projection of a human,
right?
In any lifetime or realm. It's an energy, it's a vibration. It's very, for me, also feminine. I know others. I know many shamans now that say that grandmother ayahuasca is young and feisty. Others say she's more like my age. Others say she's older grandmother, wise, gentle, grounded. So it is interesting. And what I've come to think, and I don't know if this is fact and how we could ever measure it, but I believe that she's a projection as to what we need most at that point on our journey. Yeah.
Exactly.
So for me, if she were to show up as some sort of vision, in terms of like a persona, I think the energy of the medicine would have known that would have confused me, because I have a tendency, especially in the past, before 2 years ago, to be extremely susceptible and naive to everything, and deeply trusting, like like a deer almost energy. I just would believe everything and no boundaries. And that's part of trauma. And I've definitely worked through a lot of that these past several years. But so my story was kind of similar to yours. I had been invited a few times. And for me, it was a no way. I'm putting up both the fingers like a cross.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It was a hard no. I reserved it in my mind for junkies, druggies. I had no perception on the depth of it, and no reverence for it. I was also terrified. And now I know that was the density of the mind that was too afraid to even look at it, which is what we're seeing happen with so many people right now, right? Like, I don't even want to look at it. Don't tell me about it. And they'll just believe a slur in a headline instead of ever doing any of their own due diligence. Yeah. So, but my mother wanted to go. It was at the top of her bucket list to go to this place called Rhythmia Advancement Life Advancement Center in Costa Rica. It's still to this day the only medically facilitated ayahuasca retreat center. And Reverend Michael Beckwith, who is the founder of Agape International Center of Truth, who was my teacher for 18 years throughout various ministries, et cetera, there, because he was also an investor and leading retreats there. And a lot of the people that I followed in New Thought and personal growth were all going, including Dave Asprey, who you mentioned a moment ago.
Yeah.
So I was aware enough, but it was still a hell no. But my mother put it on her bucket list. And then one day I had Jack Canfield on my podcast in 2019, and he had mentioned that he was going, and he was going again, going for the second time. And I was like, wow. Jack, I knew he was a big meditator of 40 years. And I was like, Jack, how is it any different than meditating? Like, why do you think you need that? And he tried to explain it, but you can't explain it. Although you just did a great job, Brad. That was impressive. And he invited me on that conversation to join him and some of his friends from the Transformation Leadership Council to go with them in November later that year. And that was like this big honor. And I remember feeling really touched by that, but there was no way I was going. Yeah. And then I shared it with my mom that he invited me, and she's like, wait, where? And I said, this place called Rhythmia. And she was like, Rhythmia? She's like, that's the top of my bucket list. And it wasn't in my mom's budget to just go and do something like that. And I was doing very well in my business, and I just thought, I'll do it for her. The spirit's so good.
I'm cracking up because I took my dad on a cruise when he was alive. You took your mom to ayahuasca.
Yeah, totally different. My 72-year-old mother, I think, is how old she was at the time. She was so brave. She still is one of the bravest, amazing souls ever. And so anyway, even on the flight there, I didn't clean up my diet because I was not going to do it. I was going to take her, and I was going to enjoy the grounds, the food, the room, and all the accommodations. But there was no way I was doing plant medicine. And even on the flight there, I'm eating like, I don't know, fast food crap. Like, it was just crazy, right? And you really want to alkaline your body so that the medicine can do what it needs to do optimally. Anyway, long story, probably long. I end up doing it. And it was 4 nights of a profound awakening. And I told you earlier, the first part of what I can feel was my integrative awakening was 2017 at Date with Destiny. This was definitely the next stage, the next season. I had a lifelong battle of severe body dysmorphia. It didn't matter if I was a size 0 or a size maybe 6'8", I'd vacillate. I thought I was 300 pounds, and I wouldn't even show my ankles. I wouldn't ever wear a dress or a skirt. I didn't wear any short sleeve shirts. I only wore shirts that came all the way to the wrist because I hid every ounce of my body. Such annihilation for my body. And I know a lot of women who are listening can relate, and it's a programmed, conditioned, annihilation that we were not born with. but it's part of our own healing as we return to source and restore to wholeness. And so anyway, ayahuasca on divine feminine night threw me over a fire pit like I was barbecued meat. And I'll just, without being too graphic, although that's pretty visual, burned me. You know, I knew I was in the room and I knew it wasn't really real, but I was also fully in the journey and I could not lift my head from the bed. Every time I tried to lift my head, ayahuasca, just like that, throw my head back down. I just flailed my hand, I guess, and it hit the candle. I'm actually curious interesting. Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Because that's what was truly coming through.
I love this.
Yeah. How cool is that? Anyway, so while I am burning to quote death, illusory death, because it's all an illusion, I'm also being tattooed simultaneously with every annihilating word I'd ever said about my body, to the point where there was no more visible skin. Gross, disgusting, repulsive, all these things. And then I, the whole journey continues. And the next morning, Panache Desai, it's so interesting that you bring him up because he was there. He was a friend of Jack Canfield's. Hadn't heard of Panache Desai somehow, some way, but he was at this week of plant medicine. And he was walking by and everybody had left the breakfast area. And he and I were the only two in the whole vicinity. And he was walking by and I remember hearing wind chimes. And I heard that as a message that, because I didn't know him. Yeah. I didn't want to intrude on his personal space. But I heard the wind chimes, and the message that came to the wind chimes was, you can ask him to heal you, to finish off where you didn't complete last night. And so I said, Panache, would you be willing to help me complete a healing from last night's journey? Panache Desai, I'm getting the full body chills right now. He did not ask a question. He sat down at the head of the table. He said, take my hand. He did not talk to me. He said, close your eyes. I closed my eyes. I held his hand, hear the wind chimes. I go through this whole visual of seeing my body through the eyes of a decrepit, old, sad woman who was not me. And as she was in sepia tone, and her eyes got smaller and smaller and more wrinkly and smaller and to the point where she just disintegrated like stone into nothingness. And then I felt this warm swath cleansing and clearing my heart and almost bandaging it with like a white cloth, heart, mind, like an infinity symbol. That was the motion. And then it was cleared. And I knew in that moment when I opened my eyes that I would never experience body dysmorphia again. And he opened his eyes and all he did was this. He blinked both eyes at me and he said, good. And he walked away. So he has a true gift. He is touched by inner fire.
He does.
That was part of it. The other part was I was taken to a soul retrieval from the moment that I was born. I don't want to go into details. It's all on my podcast if anyone happens to be interested. Sure. But I was shown why I never experienced any joy or had what I would call a happy childhood. I was not supposed to. I was born almost dead and then thrown in an incubator and didn't get to nurse and was under bright lights and under a plastic container for, days. And I interpreted that as a young baby that I had done something wrong and that I was unlovable. So that informed my childhood. My soul split happened at 0. And so the ayahuasca showed me that that was all by design and that it was all part of why I'm here and that I cast these characters and cast that birth all to grow me, to evolve me, part of my schoolroom curriculum. Wow. And so I look back now with such honor and reverence for just how precise spirit is. And while I don't know if I'll actually be called to plant medicine again, because the last time I did it was in the spring of 22, the message that I got at the end was, until or if you are called again, it's a no. Right. Don't even plan it. And so that's just kind of where I am now. And so if I get called, I'll know. But the experience I have deep respect for, but I also am fully aware it can be violent, it can be dark, it can be harmful. Yeah. It can be, if it's not well facilitated, it can be dangerous. And so I just put that out there because most people, I had sought after channel who channels the 12 archangels. Her name is Belinda Womack. She's probably the most sought after channel of the angels on the planet at this time. And I asked them on my show last year, what is their thought on ayahuasca? And the response was, it's powerful. It's deeply healing. And most humans would be best served to do it once.
Yeah.
And I chatted with her after I had that spring retreat. And I just knew, I was like, I'm asking this for a reason. My highest self, my soul knows, I think that's it for me. But grateful I did it. I don't think I'll do it again though. I'm just being honest.
Yeah, you said it. And a lot of people who may be listening right now, they may have an opinion, a negative opinion about ayahuasca because they've heard all the nonsense out there. Mm-hmm. But when I had Bearheart on my show, I explained it this way. Ladies and gentlemen, ayahuasca is a healing medicine that has been around for millennium in various forms in other countries. You know, they have it by other names in other countries and other bushes and all this. And what it was designed to do is when the tribe went to war or they went through a traumatic event, the warriors would come back and they would be isolated away from the tribe for a month. Mm-hmm. And they would make them go through 30 days of ayahuasca cleansing.
Yeah.
And the ayahuasca journey I was on, I had several soldiers there who were trying to clear the violence out of their auric field.
Yes, yes.
And so their experience was they were purging like you wouldn't believe. And this is what it was used for. And our government fights like crazy to not let people use it. But I was fortunate enough, my friend who brought me there, he was a soldier and he had PTSD and he was able to cure himself through indigenous plant medicines. Mm-hmm. And when I first moved to Vegas, he had me signed up for peyote. So I did peyote. Anybody who's read Carlos Castaneda, that's great and all, but real peyote is like doing 20 years of therapy in one day. Purging. And the entire time you feel like you're going to throw up. It makes your stomach queasy. Mm-hmm. And when you feel like you're going to throw up really badly, they give you more. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sananga and Hape, I've done that before I did the ayahuasca. All these are medicines to clear family trauma and trauma from this lifetime. And it's just such a wonderful healing modality. I would really love to have Graham Hancock on my show because his TED Talk was banned because he said there's a war on consciousness.
Yeah, and there is.
And he talks about this ayahuasca journey he took. We seem to be in a day and age where they want to now pull back the esoteric knowledge or the more powerful knowledge and dumb us down.
Yeah, that's right.
And we don't have to accept it, ladies and gentlemen. We can listen to shows like what Michelle does with Soul and Fire. We can tune into Panache Desai. There are other spiritual healers from all over that are available right now. And we are waking up as an entire group of souls. Some of us have come here for this main purpose, to be a stabilizing light in a very chaotic time.
Yeah, beautifully put. You know, the other thing that I wanted to share is you were sharing more about, the government and trying to suppress and actually make it illegal, right? And that's very deliberate because it does awaken the third eye. I will say this.
Yeah.
And I wished I would have said it earlier. It's important that I say this. Going through my ayahuasca journeys, and they were true shamanic journeys, I not only saw oneness, I experienced oneness. I experienced whatever my interpretation of God, divine, source, great spirit is. Yeah. And the way that has served me through how I show up as a leader, as a guide, as a coach, as a sister, as a fur mama, as a daughter, as a lover, has forever changed my life from the inside out. And the other thing is, and this is kind of wild sounding unless you've heard more people give context and texture to this kind of storytelling, is that I am now taken on shamanic journeys at my altar. I work with my sacred personal altar very regularly. It's where my television used to be years ago. And now it's just my altar. And I'm taken to my altar, beckoned to my altar when it's time, a few nights a week. And I will be taken on, sometimes I'll be pulled out of bed in the middle of the night and I'll be taken on a shamanic journey, completely sober. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do anything. Never been happier and clearer, by the way, more connected. And that's why I don't do that. I keep my channel clear. That was very clear to me in August of 21 at the very steepest part of my deconstruction. It was like sovereign mind, body, and soul. Don't let anything diminish your light, right?
Yeah.
So those journeys that I'll be taken on, sometimes it's like a cleansing, a clearing, a charging, an uplifting, a bowing in gratitude. I never know why I'm being called, but I know to honor it. And oftentimes I'll be taken on such a wild shamanic experience. And I now know if I hadn't been taken on those plant medicine journeys, I wouldn't have reference.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, wow, how beautiful is that? Like the portal, the veil is so thin. And I can get there when I plant my feet in the soil and I'm gazing up at the trees or the moon or the ocean. And so this is the war of consciousness that you speak about is very real. We are in a spiritual war. Yeah. And the sooner that we can get present to that, the sooner that we won't personalize the polarization that feels so painful. And we'll recognize that that is what happens when we are at war. Hold the consciousness for all without diluting the truth within. Yeah. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
Totally.
Yeah.
100%.
Don't do it to where it exhausts you and dilutes you, because then you've lost the whole point. But stand in the embodiment of your authentic power, because there we can hold space for all.
Fantastic what you just said. That's powerful. Someone told me this once, and I repeat it. Consciousness is a particular type of awareness that is independent of the mind.
Ah, beautiful. Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with thought patterns. It's like, how do we show up?
Yeah.
Are we being soul? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle, for being on Awakened Nation. Real quick, how do people get a hold of you? Go out to Fire and Soul, look up Fire and Soul. Awesome podcast. Where else should they go?
Oh, you're so kind. Yeah, I am everywhere at Michelle Sorro, Sorro.
Excellent. Do a Google search. I'm going to do a quick lightning round. We've gone way over, and I love when we do that because if you have time,
I've loved every moment of this, Brad.
Good. I just have 3 questions. I always like to do this so everybody gets to know Michelle Sorro a little better. Is there anything about you that fans, friends, other people, wherever, that you do that we don't know that you do? Because you're kind of an open book. So I was just curious, is there anything we don't know about you?
Well, I'd say when I was still a closet cigarette smoker, but then I even came out of the closet about that, and then I quit it completely anyway. But, well, this may sound strange, and I can't believe I'm about to say it, but when I get out of the shower, my pup likes to clean my arms and my face. And so, I mean, not anywhere else in my body, but he's standing there waiting for me to like turn off the water, and he's like my first towel. And it's just the sweet little thing that we do. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. If anyone saw this, they would probably arrest me. But that's a sweet little thing.
You do know that means he's accepted you into his pack.
Yes, totally. He thinks he is so, oh my God, he's the kindest little soul ever.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, wow. Thank you.
Do you have a favorite memory?
Oh man, I'm so in the now, I have to be honest. And I'm not just saying that. I will say because I'm a Gemini, I can't do favorites very easily. I love this moment with you, Brad. And I also really, really loved that week with my mom at Rhythmia. It was incredibly sacred to experience that with my mother. There was one night when we were coming out of the Maloka at, 3 a.m. in the morning. And we sat in a chaise lounge over at the pool, and we were just marveling at the clouds. We could see the clouds in the sky.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh my God, look at that. It's a unicorn. And of course, we were completely blissed out on the plant medicine, but it was like we were just together, 2 little peas on that chaise lounge, like a twin, right? Twin bed. And we did that for 2 hours, just laughing and connecting. And it was probably my most precious memory with my mom.
I'm just going to say this, but, a lot of times we reincarnate into this lifetime, and, there's the hierarchy, mom, daughter.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to guess that in that moment, you were just two souls that have probably been together for lifetimes who decided, oh, let's go do this. And you thought you were helping your mother. And the reality is she was helping you.
That makes me emotional. Now you made me and Panache Desai cry.
It's my job.
I haven't heard it put that way, Brad. And it is absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to share that with her as soon as we are done here.
Because, with my father, I felt like the ayahuasca was closure. Really closure with that soul. Because I know the lifetimes we've been together. Nothing is ever an accident, as you know.
Of course. We cast these characters by design in Soul Land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you one last question. What do you hope and pray for the planet Earth?
I pray and hope, and myself included in this prayer, so it's not an external request. My deepest prayer is that we all find ways in which we can raise our own vibration to the point of love, the highest vibration on the planet, known to all sentient beings. And Mother Earth is a sentient being. Her name is Gaia. She is an archangel. And that we honor her through that vibration, and that through that vibration, we remember who we are, we remember why we are here. And we celebrate that in such style and joy and harmony and fun. Yeah, that's my prayer. And I'd like to see that in my lifetime. But here's the truth is I can embody that today. And so I get to live my deepest prayer starting now.
What a way to close the show. Thank you, Michelle Sorro, for being on Awakened Nation. Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Namaste. Hey, everybody. Tune in next week for another great guest here on Awakened Nation. And please reach out. Listen to Michelle's podcast, Fire and Soul. You're going to love it. She's an extraordinary person. She glows. She carries the light within. You can see it. Once again, Michelle, thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Brad.
You bet. Take care, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success will be because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.